Friday. I'm your moderator, Lori Allen. We have a helpful and interesting Fridays with Vistage webinar for you today. It's called Leverage Doesn't Have to Be a Dirty Word. And this note, you will be receiving a link to the slides momentarily. Our presenter, Ami Kassar, is nationally renowned small business advocate. He's an Inc.com columnist. He blogs on business lending issues. He's also been featured in the Wall Street Journal, Fox Business, Huffington Post, and many others. He's a thought leader. He's an active Vistage member and a Vistage speaker. Ami, I'll turn the microphone over to you.
Lori, thank you, and I really appreciate everyone joining us to attend the webinar today. Just a little bit about what we do and so we understand it. I am the founder and CEO of Multifunding. In addition, a Vistage member, we work with entrepreneurs and CEOs around the country to help them figure out the best loan options and alternatives for their businesses. So through the years, the last 7 years, we have seen hundreds or if not thousands of different scenarios and learned all about the debt options, and we're kind of like loan doctors. We mix and match different loan programs to help each client come up with the very best possible solution. And in that process, we have learned a tremendous amount about leverage and how to successfully use leverage for your business to help your business grow. And that is really a lot about what we talk about today. I want to make one general rule for this webinar. I don't know if anyone who's listening has given a webinar before, but it's incredibly difficult because I can't look you in the eyes and see if you're interested or sleeping or getting it or happy or sad or aggravated or anything like that. So I beg of you, as you go along, please put in your questions and let's make this a discussion and a dialogue. There's no need to listen to me for 50 minutes and wait till the very end to ask your questions. By all means, please put in your questions as we go along. So the first one question is, what does the word leverage mean when you hear the word leverage? Well, leverage can mean some good things, and it can mean sometimes some very bad things. To prepare this, I went onto Google News and I punched in the word leverage, and here are just some of the few headlines I got. Advertisers seek leverage versus Facebook, a negative word. How Beijing uses ties as leverage over Taiwan. 49ers have little playoff leverage versus the Cowboys. House GOP could keep majority but lose leverage. So sometimes when we hear the word leverage, it has a very negative connotation and it almost sounds like it's something evil. And if you're not careful, leverage can be evil. But what I want to talk about today is what I consider to be a really positive definition of leverage, which is when you have the opportunity to borrow money at a significantly lower rate than your expected return. And that's really where we want to focus today. So let's dig in if we can. We're going to start with a game. So if you were all in the room, what I would do is I would each hand you 10 poker chips, and each poker chip would be worth $100,000. So I just gave you a gift of $1 million. And the rule is that you can't use the money to go buy a boat or plan an exotic vacation or buy a Lamborghini. You have to use the money to either invest in your business or invest in some mutual funds. Now, you can choose what percentage you want to invest in your business and what percentage you want to invest in mutual funds. And I'm going to hand Lori over to let us go through this exercise.
Yeah, we're going to take a poll. So you will be given some choices here. There you go. So take a few seconds to answer these and see how you would invest in your company and mutual funds. And when you're all done, hit the submit button.
So again, you have 10 chips in total. You can't cheat. You can't put 10 chips in your company and 10 in the mutual fund. That's $1 million. And what are you going to do with that $1 million? You're going to put some in your company or some in the mutual funds. We'll give you guys a little bit of time to go through it, and I'll let Lori monitor that.
Sure. So, Ami, do you do this often and get responses, or do we not want to give that away until the poll?
We don't want to give it away. Everyone will explain it, but oftentimes everybody has a different answer, and this is designed this exercise is designed, we hope, to help you think about leverage and how you would choose to make investments should you have the money available to you in your company and or in the market. So I don't know if you feel, Lori, that it's time, but if we're ready, we can close the poll and get the answer.
Yeah, the poll has been closed. We'll get the answers in about 30 seconds. But in the meantime, it's a good time to remind people to submit their questions in the Q&A panel, which is on the lower left. But if you've still got the poll open, it might be, oh, there are our results on the, what do you think?
Very good. So if I'm understanding the results correctly, I'm not seeing it on the screen up here, but so almost everyone is going to put 7 or more of their chips in their company, and very few people will put the residual in the market. So most everyone, except for, is going to put most of it in the company, if not all of it in the company, and some of it in the market. So those answers are quite typical of what we see of Vistage members around the country. And now we're going to continue. So we've taken through how we do that. And then I want to try and help you understand maybe what you were thinking about when you made that decision. You're obviously making a decision based on what kind of return you expect to get from investments in our companies and what return we invest in our mutual fund. And some element of that decision might be around diversification. So some people would say, geez, yeah, I've got a lot of chips in my company and I'd like to diversify a little bit. And some people are so excited about the company that diversification is not on their radar screen right now. So those are the elements that go into the decision. And the next poll that we're going to ask you, and Lori, I'll let you take it from here.
Okay, so I think we've got to advance the slide to see that here it is. Here's the poll.
Okay.
So the return of investment.
Question is, the return that you expect from your mutual fund could be, we put some ranges in, 2 to 5%, 5 to 10, 10 to 20, and 20 to 40 on an annualized basis. And the same question for the return you expect from the investment in your business. So if everyone could take a minute and just jot down what the expected return they think will come from each investment is.
Yeah, and then hit the submit button. And if you want to get back to the view that you had before, just click on that triangle to make it go sideways instead of down.
All right, and let's give everyone a few seconds to answer that question. All right, Lori, should we close it up and get the results?
Yeah, let's close the poll. Looks like everyone has voted, and we'll tally up those results. And again, I bet you get typical answers on me.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see. I'm not going to spill the beans. We'll be interested to see what people think.
I bet entrepreneurs, I hear that, most of you are type A and you're always thinking, so probably vote the same too. Yeah, okay. Look at that.
Absolutely. So people are typically going to expect, as is clear here, much lower returns from investing in the mutual fund where they really have no control to making investments in their companies where they have much higher control. So as is typical here, about 77 or 78% of the people, I can't do math, 75% of the people think they're going to get, by making an investment in their business, a 10 to 40% return from that investment. And one of the things I will challenge all of you to really think about is to put some, as you leave this exercise, is to put some numbers to paper and see how confident you are in those numbers. That being said, everyone's got a pile of money now between $700 and $1 million for most of you that you feel that you're going to get a 10 to 40% return on the investment for. So my next question for you is, how do you think you're going to spend it? And this is poll number 3. Some of the choices, and you can select multiple choices. You're going to take this money and invest in building out a management team, purchasing equipment, buying a building, developing new products, increasing inventory, growing your sales channels. And these questions, you have the flexibility to put in multiple choices. So
you
if
can
we
put
have
in as many as you want. Yeah.
as many you want, so you might choose, oh, I'm going to put 3 chips in my building and 2 chips on my management team, or however it might be. So if everyone can just take a few seconds and think about, if you had the money, what would you do with it? And why don't we say about 10 more seconds, Lori, and we can close the poll and keep on moving.
Okay, this is a good exercise as everyone is probably thinking about budgets for 2017, 2018, and long-term, as well as how to leverage their debt, right?
Right. All right, so let's close it up and see what people are going to say. So very fairly typical answers. Build out management team, develop new products, grow my sales channel. These are many of the drivers that drive growth. So we now have made decisions about how much money we want to invest in our businesses, what kind of returns we expect to get in our businesses, and where we would want to be spending the money or investing our leverage. And the next question sort of becomes, well, why aren't we doing these things? Remember that while I wish I was the money fairy and money grew in trees and I was giving away the money, unfortunately I'm not. But for many businesses, there are opportunities to borrow money in the single digits and turn that money into the 10 to 40% returns that you're expecting, which is the definition of good leverage, borrowing money at a significantly lower rate than our expected return. And that's really what we want to dig in today and think about. So what holds us back and what thinks us back? Many times when I meet and work with Vistage members around the country, I get feedback that they really think that to make investments in our business this year, they need to be made from this year's cash flow or profits. But the reality is, by giving ourselves the flexibility to pay off over the time, we are creating leverage. So as an example, if you want to add a management team and it's going to be a $350,000 investment, well, you could, if you had the EBITDA or the cash flow to do that, you could take a big hit this year and do that. Or you could borrow the money to do it and give yourself some flexibility for the investment to pay off over time. So a lot of the times in this mental block of thinking that we've got to pay for it with the money we make this year, we really need to learn to manage our businesses off of our balance sheets instead of our income statements. Many times we are managing off the income statement. Geez, I made this much money this year, so I can afford to invest so much of it back in the business and try new things and expand new things. And we're not thinking about our ability to add leverage to the balance sheet, which allows us to grow faster. So if there's one big takeaway here, it is to start thinking about managing our businesses off of our balance sheets instead of our income statements. So let's go through examples. There's a company. This is actually an example of a Vistage company that we work with annual revenue of $2 million and EBITDA of $400,000. And their goal is to double their revenue and their EBITDA in 3 years. And they would like to do that, really to double. They know that what is limiting them is that they really need to hire and add up a management team, which would be an estimated cost of about $350,000 a year. What's getting them stuck is if they took that $350,000 out of this year's EBITDA, they'd make almost no money, and that is understandably a scary thing. The choice that they have, if they wanted to, in this case, is that they could borrow the money, the $350,000 for 10 years using an SBA program at 6.25%. Their annual debt service would be $47,158 with no prepayment penalties, so if things can go well, they can pay it faster. And the investment should pay itself off in this model, in this example, in 2.13 years. So this company needs to double. They want to double. That's their goal. They're afraid to do that because if they pay for it all out of this year's earnings and not borrow any money, they're not going to make much money this year. So they're stuck. They're stuck where they are. And the opportunity is for them to borrow the money, give themselves the flexibility for 10 years, to have 10 years for that investment to work. Hopefully it all works. Revenue grows and doubles. EBITDA grows and doubles. The expense is $47,000 a year. And before long, if things go well and they want to, they can pay off that note with any prepayment penalty. And that is an example of labor and using an investment, a working capital investment, to invest in the labor team. Do we have any questions so far?
You know, we don't, but is this what you recommended to the company that they do?
Yeah, and that's actually what they're doing.
And it's working.
Uh-huh.
Good. And we'll remind people, you can go to the Q&A and click into that box, and you can type out your question for Ami and just hit send, and we will get to it.
Great. Just to be clear, the benefits of expanding this management team, the projected cumulative cash in the bank after interest payment will be $658,000 by year 3. And at the end of year 3, they can choose to prepay the loan. But this is good leverage, and this is if everything works and the plan moves to plan, and contrary to being stuck and being afraid not to borrow the money. Here's another example. This is a strong company with EBITDA of $1 million, annual revenue of $10 million, and they have an opportunity to buy a piece of equipment worth $500,000, and they know that if they purchase that equipment, they would be able to reduce their labor by $200,000 a year. But again, if you take that $500,000 out of this year's EBITDA or this year's earning, you are going to essentially cut your revenue in half, which is not what anyone wants to do. I mean, cut your profits in half. So what are the options? In this case, they might choose to take out equipment financing that amortizes for 5 years at 6% interest, which would make their annual debt service $115,000 a year. However, they're already going to save $200,000 in labor, so this would pay for itself very quickly. Again, it's that mental block. If you don't borrow the money, you're probably not going to do it because you don't want to cut your EBITDA in half. If you do borrow the money, you have the flexibility almost entirely pay for this thing out of cash flow because you're going to save $200,000 and your annual debt service will be $115,000. And the projected cumulative cash in the bank after the interest payments in this scenario will be $620,000 by year 6. Any questions so far?
Yes, Ami, we have a question from Kevin. He asks, are there platforms that are more effective to capitalize a business and buy out a partner? How does the existence of a heavily utilized LOC impact that?
So a heavily utilized line of credit, if your objective is to buy out a partner, assuming you're still making money, should really make no difference. If you're making money, then there's plenty of cash flow still to support some term debt to buy out the partner, and you could certainly use the SBA to do that if the numbers were correct and fit the program. So many businesses, particularly if they're capital intensive and or B2B and you have to wait for AR, that's just how it works. So the answer is, assuming the company is making money, absolutely. Any other questions before we continue? Or Kevin, do you have a follow-up question? You're welcome to ask. Okay.
Let's go on, Ami.
Great. Another scenario that companies sometimes face, particularly in the retail or the e-commerce space, is what would the benefit be of increased inventory? So here's a case with a company of $15 million with $3 million of EBITDA. And they would like to, they believe if they increase their inventory from $1 million to $3 million, they would grow their revenue and EBITDA by 10% annually. Here you go. they might choose to put in a $2 million asset-based lending facility, which would probably be, at this example, at a 10% APR. And because of their margins and their ability to grow their sales and expand their sales, even if they are adding the interest expense, that will well be outweighed by the additional sales and the additional growth. And this investment should pay for itself back very quickly, and ability to increase customers, grow customers, et cetera. So sometimes sometimes while we might be minimized by labor, sometimes we might be minimized by equipment. Another variable where we might be minimized could be inventory, and inventory is another way to think about it. And again, in this benefit, the projected cumulative cash in the back after interest payment will be $2.5 million by year 4. So again, sometimes when we go through these examples, the benefit is for good leverage. If you can borrow money at less than it's going to cost you, you can create tremendous benefits to your bottom line. But let's be careful. I've painted a rosy picture of how leverage can be a wonderful thing and can create tremendous benefits for your business. But we also have to understand that leverage has its risks also. And from our experience, there are a number of different scenarios that you have to think about when you're considering leverage and watch out for. The one is to use loan products appropriately. Generally, in the most generic sense, there are two kinds of loan products. One kind is a line of credit, and the other kind is term debt. Line of credits are there and really should be intended for cash flow blips or cash flow hiccups, as they happen in all of our businesses. And term debt should absolutely be used for investing in long-term investments. So, as an example, if I could ask the poll or we're in a live room, I would ask everyone here how many of you have a line of credit, and typically most Vistage members do. And then I would ask how many of you have used the line of credit to make capital investments in your business, and many people sneakily raise their hands. This really is not a good thing, especially because most line of credit have a clause where you have to zero them out for a month of every year to balance out. And when recessions hit, line of credits are often what banks pull back on. So one of the ways people get in trouble with leverage is not using loan products appropriately. Sometimes people get in trouble with leverage by purely and only focusing on debt, on the price of debt. What's that APR? They want that lowest possible APR number. And while I will certainly say that a low APR is important and no one wants to pay a penny more for debt than you should, you also want to take into consideration other variables, such as the prepayment penalties. How can you get out? Is the interest rate fixed or variable? What are the guarantees? What are the liens they're putting out on your business? How much availability are you going to have? In the case of that e-commerce company we just mentioned with the inventory, they might have chosen to take a $3 million line at 10% versus a $1 million line at 6%, and it still would have been worth it. Pay careful attention to all the variables when you're getting into a loan, not purely and only price, although price is certainly important. I said in one of my Wall Street Journal articles once that if you're in a rush and you go to McDonald's for lunch, you could risk indigestion for a couple hours, but you'll get over it. If you take on a loan too quickly, you could cause yourself indigestion for years or ruin your business. Despite all the promising ads on the internet and all these enticing offers that say they will save you all the aggravation and pain of going through a loan process, my best advice is don't act quickly when you're considering leverage. Carefully consider your options and alternatives. Make the most appropriate plans for your business, and this is a smart thing to do. I also like to say, think long, not short. I was just on a phone with a Vistage member who had the option to borrow money on a 7-year amortization at 4.5% or a 25-year amortization at 6.25%. And I strongly encouraged him, even though the rate is higher, to take the longer amortization because his monthly payments will be much smaller. And he certainly has the flexibility in good years to pay it off faster, and in tight months or slow months to have the benefit of the lower monthly payments. We strongly advise customers all the time, think long. Trees don't grow to the sky forever. Every business will run into hiccups or unexpected problems over time. It's hardly ever a straight line up. And minimizing your monthly payments so you've got the flexibility during those times or during those tough times is, in our opinion, a very important thing to do. And another thing I couldn't emphasize more, particularly to the folks who mentioned that those investments in their business will yield returns of 10 to 40%. That's great, but you better understand your business model darn well, because remember, when you take on the debt, you're going to have to pay it back. So how much is that investment really going to pay off for you in yield? Do you really understand your business model? Do you really understand your P&L? Do you really understand what drives your growth? Do you really understand or have low, medium, and high scenarios of what that investment is going to do for you? These are all very important things to think about and to consider. And I couldn't emphasize it more. Sometimes when we work with Vistage members and we ask them the question about what they're going to do with their poker chips, and their response is they're not sure, or they don't know, or they're not clear on their business model, the best advice is don't borrow money now. Take the time to figure out what the heck is going on. And sometimes business models are in transition also. Before we move to the next section of the presentation, which are to kind of go through some different scenarios about where you can find this debt, I invite certainly open up the floor for any questions if there are.
Well, I have a quick question for you, Ami. A couple of weeks ago, we had a Vistage webinar presenter who said that money people, financial people, are kind of sitting on things until a new U.S. president is elected. Have you found that to be true with some of the people you are working with?
I think that it is fair to say that the election year is causing some angst in the financial section. And I think it is fair to say that banks are acting more conservatively this year than they say were last year. Although my evidence is anecdotal, it's not scientific. So there's a lot of money out there, and there's a lot of money that has to be put to work. But people are quite nervous. It seems that many financing people are quite nervous at the moment.
Well, soon it will all be over, and we will have a new president, we think, right?
We think. It certainly is an interesting year, isn't it? So,
yeah.
Okay. Any other questions at this time?
No.
Okay. I wanted to talk about, in the last part of the presentation, I want to talk about 3 different places you can go look for money if you are in the market and looking for money: banks, non-bank and alternative lenders, and SBA lenders. First, what I really want to emphasize, and again, if we were all there, many Vistage members don't feel that the bank is there for them now, or the bank was there for them through the Great Recession. So many times relationships with banks are somewhat convoluted and confusing, to say the least. That being said, ladies and gentlemen, and also just to the point being earlier that banks are actingly more conservative, and it seems to be like they are acting like they're getting ready to create the next recession if they don't think it's coming. there's also a lot of consolidation in the banking industry that is causing a fair amount of chaos. However, if you can get a bank note, they are going to be the best option in almost all cases. They're going to give you the best terms, rates. They're going to have the wide range of credit products of all kinds and other ancillary products to help you. If you've got great credit, you've got great cash flow, and you've got, strong collateral, you should go to the bank and you should see what that bank is going to do for you to help you grow and expand your business. However, sadly, many times the banks just aren't there to help the businesses grow and expand, and many times the banks don't have the right tools or the right solutions or don't know of the providers. This is a big reason that during the Great Recession, we saw the creation of a new army of alternative lenders. I call it the wild, wild west of alternative lending. On almost every street corner, I joke about it, there's a different saloon out there offering you money, sometimes at exorbitant rates. And this creates opportunities and risks that members have to consider. There are all kinds. Any type of alternative lender that you can almost imagine is out there and available in many shapes and forms, though many of them are more common than others. And while in some cases, using the wild, wild west illusion, they are a ticking time bomb, and their type of loan products, often with short amortizations, can blow up your business. There are many times, and without going into each kind, that they are a good solution. If you're expanding rapidly, sometimes you need an alternative lender. If you're a collateral heavy or collateral focused business, if you want non-recourse lending, if you need some subordinated lending, if you're having some credit issues or currently having lender fatigue with your bank, there are opportunities in many cases where alternative lenders play an important role for businesses at different stages as they grow, and they certainly should be considered. However, watch out for the landmines very, very carefully. Be careful about the prepayment penalties. Be careful about the liens that they're taking on you. Understand the terms very, very carefully. Get an expert opinion. Make sure you absolutely know what you're signing up for, how it's going to be paid back. Talk to people who've used them. Get your knowledge. Talk to your lawyer or your CPA or your advisor. Make sure that if you're using a non-bank lender, remember they're not regulated by the banks, that you are using it wisely and intelligently.
Ami, can you define lender fatigue? Is that where you're just sick and tired of your bank?
Well, it's either when you're sick and tired of your bank or if your bank is sick and tired of you. So there are cases where banking relationships just go sour. It's just not working anymore, and that bank wants you out. And those scenarios have to be thought about and considered. And it's not that you're a bad business or not that another bank won't like you. Whatever reason, the banking relationship just isn't ticking anymore, because sometimes that can happen with a lawyer or an accountant or any professional service provider, and it can certainly happen with a bank as well. Any other questions?
Not yet. We encourage people to submit those as they happen.
Okay. So the next part that I want to really spend some time on and teaching and explaining, because it's often misunderstood by Vistage members, is how to take advantage or use the SBA to your advantage. The SBA, one of the key differences since the Great Recession is now that every individual can get up to $5 million of guaranteed money, and this money can really be used to your advantage and often comes at long amortizations with low collateral requirements, and certainly should be considered. There are several loan programs out there. One of them is the most commonly used one, which is the SBA program, which can be used for working capital, partner buyouts, business, buying a business, all kinds of different needs, as well as real estate, up to $5 million. The real estate amortizing out over 25 years, the working capital components over 10 years. Generally, the SBA requires to be in first lien position on your assets. However, there's a great program, not often known, that you can borrow $350,000 or less, and they will be in second lien, and they won't require a lien on your house or your residence as well. The SBA 504 program, also misunderstood, is a great program for investing in your own real estate for your business and or equipment for your business. And the nice thing about this loan is that 40% of it is fixed for the life of the loan, which is a tremendous benefit. And you can, because of the way the guarantee works, you can buy a property up to $12 million with that program. And the SBA also has import-export programs, particularly if you are an exporting company. The government will guarantee 90% of the loan instead of 75% of the loan, which will give the bank more reasons and more incentives to lend the money and take more risk. Again, the SBA is not the lender. The bank or the individual lender you're talking to is the lender, and that is worthy to think about. So if you walk into one SBA lender and they tell you no, don't think that that means you are ruled out for the SBA program. To the contrary, there are many SBA programs that you can go to. What are the pros and cons of the SBA? The pros are interest rates are reasonable. You get longer time to pay it back. There's low equity requirements. We just helped a business member buy his first building. He put 2% down. And banks are encouraged to take more loans and more risks because the loans are partially guaranteed by the SBA. Some of the cons: personal guarantees are required. All collateral available will be liened unless it's $350,000 or less. The loans require cash flow. They are time and paperwork intensive. And not in all, but in many cases, the rates are floating. So you have to weigh it up. But again, if you're not bankable and you can get an SBA loan, they will almost always be more beneficial than going straight to the bank. SBA loans can be used for debt restructuring, expansion and acquisitions. They can be used for collateral light but cash flow strong businesses, leasehold improvements. Sometimes startups will work, particularly if they're franchises. They can be used for working capital financing, equipment needs. You can do almost anything you can imagine with an SBA loan as long as you have a strong business case to back it up. But also be careful, and this is what I tried to point out early, that people often make the mistake of thinking that if they go to the bank and the bank tells them the SBA is not a good idea, or et cetera, that they're out. That's the furthest thing from the truth. Every bank, there are about 2,200 SBA lenders around the country. While they all have the same book of rules that they have to follow, they all interpret those rules a little bit differently and with a little flexibility, and can do a lot of different things with it. Again, today's discussion is about borrowing money at a significantly lower rate than our expected return. And I've tried to take you through an exercise of thinking about what kind of returns you would expect if you had money to invest in your business. And many of you have told me between 10 and 40%. And then I've also tried to give you examples to think about. Well, certainly there is risk. Properly done leverage, if those returns are legitimate and you can borrow money at 5, 6, or 7%, a really good question is, why aren't you doing these things? Why aren't you unlocking at least the financial code to help leverage and grow your business and expand it and help fulfill your dreams? And with that being said, I really would invite anyone to ask any questions or anything that you might want to discuss.
Well, Ami, how do you and your company help people? Do you find the best loan for them, or how does it work?
Well, what we do is we listen to the story and we advise the business about the options and the alternatives that are available to them. And then if you're interested to work with us, we and what we're suggesting makes sense to you, we will help you put the right package together. We've put a network together of over 100 different lenders, and we'll work with you, and then we'll get paid a commission if and when the loan closes. Typically, the commission is paid by the lender, not by the borrower. And we do this around the country for our customers.
Right. Well, we have a question from Terry. We have customers that would fit the alternative lender model. Where can we get names of these lenders to recommend to them?
I think that I'd be happy to discuss it with you, Carrie. A lot of it depends on what the types of customers are and what their attributes are and what their needs are. So I'm happy to have a one-off discussion with you, but you need to understand it's hard to ask that question generally without getting into, what are they buying from you? Is it equipment? What are the services they're buying from you? What's the ticket amount? And what type of businesses are there? There are a lot of variables that go into that before we could comfortably answer it.
Is there a certain percentage of profit or of net worth that you advise a company not to borrow above?
Really, that's very. You need to understand your cash flow, and you need to understand how comfortable the lender is about your ability to make the payments. So if you are able to get a bank or an SBA lender comfortable around your ability to cash flow and make the payments, and they're confident that they can get paid back, it's probably a pretty safe bet. If it's an alternative lender giving you the money at high rates, you can't take that to the bank that you're going to be able to pay that back. So a lot of that comes, every situation is different, but the underwriting standards and criteria of the banks and lenders is there to protect you and should be considered accordingly.
You know how on a personal level they say do take a loan out when you know you can pay it back just to build your credit? Does the same philosophy apply to companies?
I don't think you do it to build your credit, but I certainly would encourage anyone listening, if they don't have a line of credit for their business, to get it, because it's like an insurance policy. Even though you might never use it or touch it, you never know when the unexpected might happen, and it's smart to have it and the flexibility of it.
Tell us some more stories of whether companies have really succeeded by taking your advice on this.
So we have one Vistage member in Northern California who we're working with. When we met him, he was about 7 months into a deserted lumber yard that he had taken over. And he had started with some of his own money, but he was literally running out of cash because running a lumber yard with the AR and the inventory is very labor intensive. We got him a asset-based line against his inventory and AR within 60 days of meeting him. And as that process started, it was a $5 million line of credit. He took his employees from like 30 to 90, and his sales, I think, will be $25 or $26 million this year because he just needed the capital to grow and expand his business. And in that particular case, it's a case, although because he's in year one, his leverage is quite expensive, his cost of capital will absolutely go down as the year evolves.
Wow.
So, again, there is a case of somebody using leverage very well. We also see, on the flip side of it, we see business owners who've taken on too much debt and too much short-term debt, and the cash flow pressure of having to pay this off so quickly has caught up with them, and they're on the verge of bankruptcy because they took on leverage that didn't make sense and that they couldn't afford to pay back. So think very carefully and thoughtfully about the loan product that you're getting and what it's going to do for you and how.
So I was thinking we're close to Halloween. That sounds like kind of a horror story. Any other advice that people need to know so they won't end up like that?
Don't act hastily. Don't wait for that emergency. If you're in good shape today and you don't have a line of credit, go get it. Think about the SBA and how to use it to your advantage. Think about what's holding back your business and what investments would be wise to help you grow. You've got to think about the stuff offensively and defensively. Money is at all-time low rates today that we might never see again in our lifetimes. It's a good time to take advantage of it and use it to grow our businesses. At the same time, you've got to be careful, thoughtful, and methodical and not do something dumb. There are a lot of people out there who would love nothing more than to take your shirt off your back and sell you a loan that's too good to be true. If it sounds like it's too good to be true, it probably is.
I'm going to ask you a personal question, Ami. How has being a Vistage member benefited you?
Being a Vistage member has it helped me enormously. It's helped me grow. Personally, I'm building great friendships. It's helped me think about my business in new ways. I enjoy also the opportunity to help my fellow members, and I really thoroughly enjoy it, as well as the opportunity to travel and work with many Vistage companies around the country as well, going through some of these exercises, but doing them in person.
And we have another question. Here it is. In looking at acquisitions of companies other than using a line of credit, what other funding would be available if we're purchasing inventory, rolling stock, and some blue sky?
I strongly encourage for any acquisition to consider the SBA, because definitely over a line of credit, because with the SBA, you get 10 years to pay it back and time to make that investment work. So depending on the loan amount and if the investment you're making is in a cash flowing company, and depending how your business is performing, anytime there's an acquisition of $5 million or less, we strongly think about the SBA, essentially because you get 10 years to pay that back instead of 3, 4, or 5 that a typical bank line would give you.
Good. Well, as we start to wrap up, Ami, any final words of advice?
Again, I would say think defensively and offensively. You should review this stuff and your leverage and your debt. It's almost like going to the dentist. Twice a year, you should look at it, think about it, and decide what is best for you to grow and expand your business.
Well, thank you so much for being with us. This has been so enlightening for me, and I bet a lot of other people too. And you've been kind to put all your contact information up there so people can get in touch with you, because if they're like me, the webinar is going to end and then they're going to think of a question they want to ask.
Exactly. But anyone can feel free to reach out to me at any time, or anyone on my team. We would be happy. We do a lot of work with Vistage members around the country. We're also a national sponsor of Vistage, and would be delighted to help you and go from there.
Great. Well, thanks again, Ami. And I want to tell you about an interesting webinar we have coming up. It's going to be Friday, November 4th at the usual time, Fridays with Vistage, and that's exactly 4 weeks from today. The Global Business Network and Fridays with Vistage present Global Business and Economic Outlook for 2017. It's with Connor Lokar, economist at ITR Economics, and he's going to tell us how to stay ahead of the curve in knowing the economic climate for regions around the world. He'll give detailed regional coverage on North America, South America, all parts of Europe and Asia. And during the webinar, Connor will review ITR's economics outlook for the major economies and discuss how the predictions may impact exchange rates. So go ahead and register for that when you get a chance. Again, it's Friday, November 4th. Well, that does it for this webinar. We want to thank you for attending, and for all of us at Vistage, I'm Lori Allen, wishing you big profits, good leverage, and a nice weekend.